Welcome to the finale of Let's Play Metroid Prime for the Nintendo GameCube. It's prime time! Last time we took care of some final preparations in um, pursuit of Impact Crater. Took down Meta Ridley, and here we are in the last area of the game, Impact Crater. It is quite small, and for whatever reason, Retro has this weird obsession with making their final areas small. Because it'll only take us like 5 minutes before we get to the end of it. So, yeah. That being said, don't forget to take your scan visor out because there are indeed new creatures out and about for you to scan. Not much, mind you. There are only really like 3 more monsters left to scan. You have these guys, one other creature that we'll be facing in the next room, and then the final boss itself. A two-form final boss, if you will, and they actually require separate scan book entries. So, anyway, this here is red Phazon. This stuff is so poisonous that not even your Phazon suit will protect you from this. And I'd like to imagine that like the Tallon IV Leviathan seed has to have way more Phazon emanating from it than every other like instance of Phazon, and that's because you never really see red Phazon again for some odd reason. I don't really know why, and it seems like it had to have been like a missed opportunity, I feel like. We could have like gone into greater detail with this and see whether or not like the space pirates would have found something like this and made like their onslaught even more ruthless than ever. But yeah. This place is creepy. The music is extremely unsettling. This place just gives me the heebie-jeebies. I mean, look at this. This looks like something out of an artery or whatever. And speaking of arteries, here's a big pain in the artery itself. I've alluded to these guys at some point or another, but, like, no. Not even the wave troopers come close to the annoyance that is the Phazon Metroids. My least favorite enemy in the entire game. I absolutely don't like these fools in any capacity, to the point of where I'm probably going to be skipping a lot of them because they are obnoxiously tanky. They change forms that correspond with like whatever beam you need to use to shoot them up, and on top of that, they have a tendency to split into even more. So, like, you have these tanky-ass enemies that force you to not only switch between different beams, including beams that you may not like, but you also have to deal with the fact that they mutate too. And at this point, this is the only instance where I just say, screw it. I am avoiding these enemies at all costs. And yeah, you could technically take a power bomb and blow them up in one hit, but here's the thing. I actually kind of want to save the power bombs for the last fight in the game, because without these power bombs, the final phase of the boss is going to be significantly more annoying. And this Metroid really wants your attention, apparently, because he's constantly ramming me in the face. I see you, buddy. I see you, buddy. I'm not going to give you the benefit of a doubt. Trust me. You're big, threatening, and a huge hindrance at that, but that doesn't give me any obligation to pay any attention to you whatsoever. So yeah, you have a missile station here in case you absolutely need it, which seems a little weird to me considering that you have Samus's gunship like literally like less than a mile away from the area in the first place, so I don't know. But yeah, just simply want to make your way to the top of the structure here with these small suspended platforms, and okay, fine. You know what? Get over here. Christ. I'm just glad they decided, hey, these enemies are so annoying, let's just stick them in the final area just to piss the player off, instead of, like, putting them in Phazon mines or something. That would have been even more annoying, could you even imagine? But yeah, take this route here, and the final boss is just beyond that door. It's crazy, man. I'm actually going to finish this playthrough before 2021. It's quite a crazy feeling, I must say. But yeah, here we are. the big menace and namesake of the game himself. And all of the logbook entries have pointed within the general direction of this gigantic behemoth of a monster. This here is Metroid Prime. And he's going to give us the prime time of our lives. Oh, I just had to throw in one more pun for good measure. And this guy doesn't really want to fight us, apparently. Or is he luring us into a trap of his own? Let's find out.
A few moments later.
And I'm dead. God damn. Oh, no. That sucks. Well done. Okay. This thing has already killed me. Twice. And you know what? I'm loving every second of this. This here is arguably the best way to challenge anyone who's playing through Metroid Prime and putting all of their skills to the test, because holy shit, this final boss, he is no pushover, and in a good way too. And I'm going to be talking about that in depth as we progress into this hole and start to fight anew. Holy shit, this dude is so difficult, especially on hard mode. So, this dude is the culmination of everything I've complained about in terms of like what Metroid Prime was lacking in its boss fights. This dude is constantly changing his strategy through the fight, and he actually has an outer shell that changes color in between segments, and in doing so, he leaves himself vulnerable to different beams you need to be utilizing throughout the fight. But on top of this, not only are you having to switch your beams up and adapting to like how you need to use those beams throughout the fight, Metroid Prime also has a slew of moves that he can use along with said beams, and it definitely never feels like he's doing the same thing more than once throughout most of the fight. This dude is constantly adapting throughout the fight, and he gains new moves throughout the fight as you put on damage. And this is how I would personally design a final boss for certain, because you obviously want to throw out the toughest shit imaginable at the player, and you want to test them for everything that the game has taught them up until this point in terms of combat, in terms of problem solving, multitasking. This fight is ruthless, and I actually kind of recommend holding on to the missiles here. I made the mistake of using the Wave Buster to drain its energy, and it doesn't quite drain its energy as fast as I would have liked personally. And for once, I actually kind of like the Wave Beam in this fight as well. And that's mostly because this dude is constantly moving around, and it's very difficult to get a proper lock on, especially with your slower beams, which actually makes the Ice Beam portion of the fight the most annoying. And that's why I want to save my missiles throughout this fight, because I want to save that exclusively for the Ice Spreader and the Super Missile. And maybe I might be able to squeeze in the Flamethrower in between segments. We'll find out, because the Flamethrower is kind of unwieldy and very difficult to like use, because again, it doesn't lock onto targets like the Wave Buster does, unfortunately. So using it on a giant target with a small weakness, no less, yeah, that kind of spells unwieldy and awkward, and I can't really do much about that, unfortunately. And you definitely want to make sure you don't ignore any of the projectiles he's throwing out at you. So not only are you constantly throwing your best arsenal at him, you need to make sure you take care of any of the slow-moving projectiles that he's got heading within your direction, because you will absolutely regret it if you don't. You got to make sure that you're not only keeping your eye on Metroid Prime at all times, but you want to be certain that you're taking care of all of the physical onslaught headed your way. This dude does not leave too many openings within his defense, or rather, he's always got things going on even as he's under attack. And this is definitely like the best way to design a boss fight, I think, because like you're not waiting for him to open up, but the challenge comes within you actually landing the shots and making sure you're dealing with all these different things going on at once. And I really wish more boss fights throughout the entire game would have taken, you know, advantage of that fact. And instead of the Omega Pirate and Ridley, you know, turning out the way they did, you know? And luckily, I'm doing a lot better than I did the previous 2 times. And that's mostly because I've been holding on to my missiles throughout this fight. And it's proving to be pretty beneficial so far. Double jumping also helps a lot in this fight as well. I don't recommend strafing too much because sometimes these projectiles linger long enough to where I actually end up accidentally jumping into like the field of residue, and that's not something you want to end up doing ever. So that is something you most definitely want to do, is mix up your movement throughout the fight as you move along. The first fight is divided into 4 segments, and then the final phase takes place in its own room. And the final part of the fight actually ends up being its own scannable entry too, and it's the last entry in the game to scan as well. So you'll know if you got 100% completion if you got a pop-up upon scanning the last phase of Metroid Prime, which I know I won't because I missed the fucking ice streak bets, but like that is something you should know nevertheless. And yeah, like the homing trajectory of the wave beam shots are actually proving to be pretty beneficial despite its low attack power, because again, its weak spot is so tiny that like it being able to home in on the target does more than make up enough for, like, you know, having to move through all this projectile onslaught. And I can actually focus more on dodging the stuff instead of trying to focus on whether or not I can get my shot in and actually be able to like do any damage. And as he's doing all this kind of nonsense. So yeah, for once, the wave beam portion of the fight is something I kind of look forward to the most, and it's the best RNG you can get in this fight, contrary to what we've been facing prior throughout most of the game. You also want to be able to squeeze yourself into Morph Ball when you can once he runs at you. And during the last part of the fight, this actually especially gets annoying because he gets to a point where he stops really doing things in a regimented pattern, and he just kind of throws shit out whenever he wants. And this can also account for the fact that sometimes he can just straight up spend a part of the fight just trying to ram you like 3 times in a row, as opposed to like giving you any room to breathe between segments. And again, this is a fight where you definitely need to have your reaction time on point, and you need to adapt on the fly. But yeah, personally speaking, I love the challenge that this part of the fight delivers. I don't know if I'd say if I like this more than Metroid Prime 2's final boss, relatively speaking, but this is definitely one of the best final bosses of the entire Metroid saga, for certain. Don't ignore the projectiles, as I've stated before, and sometimes the projectiles, the slow-moving ones anyway, can actually leave behind energy pickups and shit for you to ingest, and I definitely recommend it. I swear, I can't ever aim the stupid flamethrower. Oh my god. This is why I don't like the flamethrower, because it's just not good for most of... It's just not good for most of the bosses that are left in the game by the time you get it. It's like, because they're constantly moving, they don't always have available weak points, and it's unwieldy, man. I don't like the flamethrower. Sure, it's just a little bit stronger than the Wave Buster, but like, I typically prefer consistency over firepower for the most part, unless you're the Wave Beam. In your case, you can kind of suck it outside of this fight, but like, he's giving me some pretty good RNGs thus far, and yeah, I'm doing way better. Like, last time I fought this dude and I made it to this part of the fight, I only had like 4 energy tanks left, and this is when things start getting pretty damn hectic, because not only can he do certain attacks on a whim, he's also changing up whenever he goes into a beam form at any given time. Like, beforehand, he'd only really switch beam forms dependent on like how much you damaged him, and he's just gonna keep doing this, isn't he? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, he can just interrupt one attack that he just did and just cancel it with another. He is constantly changing forms just to throw you off. And it really, my best strategy for this is to keep, is like, if you feel like he's still switching, the best thing to do is to stay on a faster beam as he's doing this, so that way when he switches over to it, you can have a charge beam ready to throw at his face once he's done. And he's let his guard down to stay within the form he is in currently. Yeah, double jumping is helping a lot, I'm finding. Like, I think double jumping in this fight is significantly more helpful than strafing around, because I feel like whenever I strafed around too much, it just landed me in the residue, and it put on more damage on me than what should have been necessary. Oh, speaking of canceling attacks, and is he doing that thing I talked about where he's just gonna ram me like 3 times in a row? I think that's what he just did, and I couldn't even tell because he hit me so hard. My visor just ran up into static. You can really feel the impact his blows feel on you too. That's why I definitely recommend like putting on the vibration function for this game is the best way to go, because you can really feel the impact of like how powerful these enemy blows are, and like you get this really violent, vibrant flow within your controller when you get hit by all this nonsense, and it's just like you can really feel the strength of Metroid Prime flowing through the fight, just like in person. It's one of those things that you have to be there to like understand, you know? And oh god, of course. Can I switch? Okay. I might actually start using the Wave Buster now, because we're getting to the end of the fight. This is why it's risky to use the Wave Buster, because when you're concentrating all of your firepower on Metroid Prime, you're not leaving yourself enough room to like be able to like take care of the other projectile onslaught that's on screen. And that was the mistake I was making the first 2 times around, was that I was relying way too much on the Wave Buster, but because you can only fire on one target at a time, this also kind of leaves you very vulnerable to whatever else he might throw at you, because he can attack you with plenty of other shit as he's being attacked. This is a fight where he's just completely on the aggressive through and through. But with that being said, this fight's not quite over yet. There is one last form of the fight. Unlike the praise that I've given the first form, I'm not quite a big fan of this part, and that's mostly because it treads into the territory of things that I didn't like about the other Metroid Prime bosses already. And it's like, did we have to resort to this? Really? I mean, the music's pretty kick-ass, though. I love this track. It's definitely probably my favorite final boss track in the entire series, for certain. This is the core essence of Metroid Prime. Scans indicate that the Phazon energy form of Metroid Prime is invulnerable to all conventional weapons. So that's why I kind of recommended that, like, it's okay to go through most of your missiles through the first form, because you're not going to really use them here. In fact, we're going to be using something else entirely. It generates pools of Phazon when it attacks. Use these to fuel your suit's Phazon weapon system. The entity can also spawn Metroids to assist it in battle, rendering itself invisible when it does so. So, our Phazon suit actually comes with another function. Whenever we step into high quantities of Phazon, which, now that I think about it, it makes me question why the red Phazon didn't quite trigger this. Whenever we step into the pools of Phazon, he triggers. This actually gives us access to the most powerful weapon in the game, the Phazon Beam, and it's basically the Hyper Beam equivalent of this game in the sense that it's only really something you can use in this fight, and it's the only way you can put on any meaningful damage on Metroid Prime. But no, the thing I don't like about this fight is that, you know how I was talking about in the last phase where, well, the last fight where when we were fighting Ridley, like, most of it was spent just waiting for the boss to, like, get down on our level and do something. And he spent so much time just flying around, doing a whole bunch of nothing. that is this fight in a nutshell, because like the only thing he's got really, you know, for offense is this shockwave attack he does in between rounds. But also, there you are. He's got this shockwave attack, and occasionally he'll send in other Metroids to do the dirty work for him. This is also a battle where you need to constantly switch your visors up through the fight. So not only will you be relying on the X-ray scope, you'll be relying on the combat visor and the thermal visor as well. So keeping your eye on Metroid Prime and everything that he's doing is pivotal in winning this fight. And of course, being that we did come in, considering the fact that we did come in from a portion of the fight where, did he already? Okay. Considering that we did come in from the first phase of the fight with all of our resources intact, that also includes the fact that like you definitely need to hold on to as much energy as possible through the first phase of the fight. Because while this is kind of boring and really like long-winded at first, another thing to consider is that he does bring in Metroids, and the Metroids in particular also happen to be Vision Metroids later on into the fight. And if you already know this by now, then I guess it's not too necessary to hear, but you know what, I'll just state it again anyway. I fucking hate Vision Metroids. They're the absolute worst goddamn thing imaginable. And, he usually spawns them whenever he's creating these pools of Phazon. And they're the things that'll keep you distracted throughout the fight. And that's why I recommended holding on to the power bombs, because, again, these guys will shake you off from the Phazon pools, and these Phazon pools are pretty tiny, I might add. So, I technically like saving my power bombs for the Vision Metroid, so that way I can get rid of them in one blast and then focus all of my efforts on Metroid Prime. Now, the thing to consider is that whenever he switches between different fields of vision, he normally does this upon activating a Phazon pool. So it's pretty obvious to tell when he's going to do this just by like that alone. And as long as you keep this into like consideration, go away, then it's pretty obvious to know when you need to switch visors. It's just a question of what visor you need to switch between. And so far, it's been kind of a roulette selection. Like, okay, so he switches from combat visor field to X-ray scope vision to thermal visor and then back to combat visor. And I don't know if it's an RNG thing or if it's actually like a roundabout thing, but that's generally how it works. And yeah, that's pretty much the whole fight in a nutshell. It's just waiting for him to create this pool of Phazon so you can destroy him with his own properties, and it's not a terribly exciting fight. It's kind of a letdown considering how awesome the previous fight with him was, so... Ow. And of course, the Metroids are incredibly weak to the Ice Beam outside of the Vision Metroids, which is again why I recommend the Power Bombs for them, and solely them. So, stay on your guard here. Alright, buddy. Sucks that this is like the only attack he does too, like... Man, I mean, I guess I kind of get it, because like the first form was so rough, and you're pretty much left with the energy you had, you know, coming into this fight from the first phase, so I can understand them taking it a little bit easy. But like, I don't know. Rock Visor, where are you at? And yeah, throughout the duration of the fight, the Phazon pools last significantly longer than usual. So, you kind of want to be on the aggressive throughout most of this fight. Once he spawns those Phazon pools, because that's why I specifically requested power bombs are like absolutely necessary for this kind of fight. Shake off those Metroids, get right to the Phazon pool, and start blasting. Are those 100 Metroids again? Yeah, they are. Alright, like he's almost dead. I think I got a power bomb pickup out of that too. I did have to redo the first phase twice, so I didn't really take the time to scan the Fission, Metroid, or the Lumix all over again. And on top of that, I kind of got a little bit more reckless than usual trying to get to this point, which I guess is to be expected. Gotta keep that commentary fresh, yo. Stop screaming at me, you creepy fuck. Why is it me, or the Hunter Metroid's like significantly easier to actually hit? What's up with that? Bang! Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. This is supposed to be the epic, like, climactic conclusion to this playthrough, and I'm like struggling to like think of anything else to say that hasn't already been said. Oh my god. I'm just hoping that the last two Phazon pulls, these like sprinkles onto the ground here, end up being what I need. Oh, he hasn't been deficient Metroids yet, huh? I don't like that his body suddenly gets in the way whenever you get to the Phazon pull. Actually, now that I think about it, this kind of reminds me of when Nintendo Power used to do comics, actually, and like, they actually did a short Metroid Prime comic series for a while, and they had like Samus monologuing over a lot of the things that were going on either. And it was like, it was funny too, because I actually remember seeing that before I ended up really actually running into the final boss itself. And so, like, I guess I had these expectations that this thing would be incredibly awesome to do, especially like once, like, the comic book strip actually kind of indicated that like Samus ended up running into like this Phazon pull by mistake halfway through the fight, and like it really kind of set up the tension for like how the rest of the fight was going to go. And I don't know, little 9-year-old me thought it was like the coolest thing ever when like Nintendo Power was like doing these comics, and it was like showcasing all of these little details, because it's kind of cool to see like what these characters are thinking in like these desperate, like almost near hopeless moments, and like the comics did like a pretty decent job of conveying that. Granted, they were kind of cheesy. This is the early 2000s, mind you, so like our mentality was still kind of stuck in the 90s, mind you, but like back then we thought it was the coolest thing ever, and I wish today like Nintendo did more shit like that, especially considering that we have like a new generation of gamers, and like I feel like they fucking love shit like that, you know? Especially for a lot of the newer franchises they've created over like the span of like nearly 20 years after this game came out. Oh god, excuse me. Ah! Oh, that's why. Like, can you imagine if they ended up creating a Xenoblade comic strip, or like, yeah, like a Xenoblade like 1 or 2 like comic book series, or like a Pikmin comic series. Well, that actually sounds kind of silly in retrospect. I didn't think about that, but it could work. I mean, you can have Captain Olimar like doing his constant monologues throughout the comic book, and it would actually kind of work in regards to the pacing of the comic. But like, you can have that. You can have all these different sorts of like new franchises that have come out within all that time. Yeah, it really has been roulette with Metroid Prime so far in regards to how I need to switch my visors. Okay, so that's good to know. But, yeah, that was the end of the fight. That is the end of Metroid Prime. Boo-yah. And I love how you have these energy pellets just sitting in the middle of the cutscene here. It's like, they couldn't have taken them out or something and put this on a different map. That just kind of ruins the moment a little, don't you think? Oh, well, I guess he's just going to take our Phazon suit away. Oh, alright then. Not that we had much time to cope with it, because we only had it for like a grand total of like 3 parts now. Not even that, because like part 19 was so short. But yeah, pretty simple yet effective ending, because that definitely implied that like something's up with that kind of weird interaction. I really wish they would have put us through like an escape like sequence too. Like it's pretty cool seeing all of this in like action here, but like I really wish they could have like given us an escape sequence to come out of like um the impact crater. Would have made our stay there a little bit more significant, I guess. Outside of it just being the final area and you just get to the final boss and that's it. And oh my god, that human face has not aged all too well. Sorry, Samus, but I'm pretty sure you'll do your model better justice in the next game. But yeah, it's kind of fucked up to think that, like, in spite of all of this, in spite of us getting rid of the source of Phazon here, Tallon Overworld, Tallon 4 that is in such great disarray that, like, the Chozo can never truly come back here. And it really turns Tallon 4 into, like, you know, a desolate wasteland for the rest of its years. So it's like, I guess that's kind of like what the music's indicating here, because, like, we got rid of the threat, but, like, what does that really say for, like, the remainder of the Chozo there? Like, where does Talon go from here? Because it's not like we blew up the entire planet. I mean, hell, we know about this in Metroid Prime 3 when they give us updates on the current situations of, like, the planets we've been through in the previous 2 games. But yeah, Metroid Prime, again, I'm so happy I finished this playthrough, and I loved every minute of this going back into it. Well, not every minute. I think the backtracking gets really repetitive really fast, especially once you have to utilize Magmore Caverns countless times throughout the playthrough. I think Magmore Caverns could have been structured a lot better because it just isn't naturally formed in such a way where, like, getting from, like, another area to another feels like, you know, a faster, like, trek, you know, back and forth, you know, and I guess, you know, Prime 1's bosses haven't aged entirely too well. I mean, and you know what? I can't really hate the game for that, because this was, you know, the first Metroid Prime game after all, and it's one of the very first games of its kind. Of course it's going to run into hiccups, and for the first game that pulled off the Metroidvania in a 3D format, let alone in first person, you know, it not being a generic first person like game like, say, Call of Duty or Halo was. I just called Halo generic, oh my god. But, like, they did an amazing job differentiating themselves from the crowd for certain. Like, it just sucks that, like, in the long run, like, Metroid Prime just didn't have that significant impact in a way where other games like Portal or Portal and you know, other first-person adventure games like Fallout and Half-Life did, for example, because they went beyond the first-person campaign format and showed that it's definitely possible to create like an adventure-based game out of this formula. And, like, yeah, Prime definitely set the standards, and it is technically the best-selling game in the series, but it just sucks that, like, people didn't really see Metroid Prime like that back then, because, like, when you compare the sales of this to, like, its other contemporaries, because you gotta remember that, like, the Nintendo GameCube didn't do too well, all too commercially speaking, and we didn't come to appreciate games of this caliber until several years later. But, like, God, I lost my train of thought. um, it's just funny how all of that works, you know? Like, we truly don't appreciate these kind of games until, like, you know, it's gone. And then we're like, oh shoot, this was a masterpiece. Why didn't we, like, go out and buy a GameCube for this? And It makes me happy that the gaming industry landscape has changed so much since then, because like you got to remember what people wanted back then was completely different than now. And I think games like, again, Half-Life and Portal and like Mega Man 9 even changed it to where it was like, oh, well, the game doesn't have to be a high-end cutting piece of technology in terms of graphics and what have you to be an amazing game. It just has to play amazingly well. And yeah, I'm not saying that Metroid Prime isn't like amazing looking, because it held up amazingly well in terms of its visuals. But like, um, people just didn't view the GameCube like that at the time. Like I remember back, like I grew up with the GameCube, and it was kind of painful when I saw other people simply ignoring the GameCube or didn't have a GameCube because they thought it was this kiddie console that just didn't have a whole lot. And that's why I have a library of over 30 GameCube games, so I can prove to these people that no, you're fucking wrong. The GameCube had an amazing library, and it's much better than the Wii ever was. So, oh man. But yeah, that was Metroid Prime. I love this game, but I love its sequel even more. And if this is the secret ending you get once you get 100% completion for all of the expansions in the game. And those are the remains of Metroid Prime, if you couldn't tell. And oh boy, that's kind of creepy. That is very creepy. That's very unsettling. Holy shit. So yeah, that wraps up our playthrough of the main campaign. Anyway, we got some extra goodies we need to show off before officially wrapping up this playthrough. But if you're not here for the bonus content, then I will be seeing you guys in Metroid Zero Mission for the GBA. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys then.